Hello, Save the Water volunteers. It's a pleasure to have you with us on board. This video is to discuss what a timesheet is, how to properly fill it out, how it functions, and how it's used. So what is a timesheet? A timesheet is a spreadsheet maintained by each volunteer at Save the Water that tracks the time volunteers spend on different tasks, projects, and functions. It allows directors and associate directors to not only know how their team is spending time in the group, but it's also used for reporting purposes, but we'll discuss that later. So how do you actually fill out the timesheet? There are two tabs present in a timesheet, the Daily Tasks tab, which I have open currently on my screen, and the Weekly Hours tab. All inputs should be made on the Daily Tasks tab, as the Weekly Hours tab fills out automatically from the inputs on the Daily Tasks tab. The information required is standard across the entire organization, and there are 7 columns to be filled in by each volunteer. So, for this video, I'm going to record just how I would if I were filling this out for my timesheet when I was creating this video. So I'm going to assume that today is January 7th of 2016. So I will put in the date column 172016. The next column asks you how many hours you actually spent working on that particular task. I'm going to assume it took me 1 hour to film this video. The next column is group, and some of our volunteers work in multiple groups in the organization, so it's important to include which group that task was for so the hours can be given to the proper group. So for me, I'm in the operations group, so I will put operations. The next one is a drop-down menu that has 4 different topics or descriptions. The first one is team/org meetings, and this is for any meeting that a volunteer attends on behalf of Save the Water, even if it's an external meeting. So if you go to a webinar on behalf of Save the Water. This is also used for director meetings or your monthly team meetings or any other meeting with volunteers. The second one is supervisory/administrative. This topic is used for emails, reports, general inquiries, delegating duties if you're in leadership. The next one is project planning, implementation, and tracking. This is used for the involvement in any stage of a project, and that could be writing an email that will begin the project. That could be sending out a correspondence to the rest of the organization saying what changes are happening. That could be attending a meeting or for that project or creating a project plan. Whatever it is, it will fall under that category. The last one is training/hiring, and this is used for the training of new volunteers, going through training as a volunteer like you are right now, or going through the hiring process. So for me, this is a project, and I'm going to select project planning and implementation/tracking. The next column is task, and this allows for both the volunteer as well as the director to know which task the volunteer was working on that date. The decision on how to fill this out is up to each volunteer and their director. Some will want a single line for every task. So for me, I would just put a timesheet video. However, some people like to group things and put it under the same row if it's under a common theme. So let's say I also made a project plan. I could put project plan. Now, as long as both of these tasks were both a part of projects, and it was for the operations group, and it only took me 1 hour to do both of these, everything's fine. But for me, I like to have a single task for each line, so I'll get rid of project plan and leave it just a timesheet video. But like I said, either way is fine, and that's up to you and your director. The next column, which is notes, is where a volunteer could add in a description of what exactly they did for that task. So if you were sending an email, you could say, email Joe about XYZ project. In the case of this video, I'll just put recorded timesheet video. The last link is entitled document location and then in parentheses link. This box is used if there's an actual link to a document or a project you're working on. Sometimes there is an actual link and sometimes there's not. So for example, if you're writing an email, there won't be a link. However, when I'm done recording this video, there will be, and I could attach that here so I can go back and remember what exactly this project was. So how exactly does this sheet function? As I said earlier, the weekly hours tab is populated from inputs on the daily task tab, which is what we just filled out. The weekly hours tab finds all of the inputs for the different topics during a week and then adds them together. It then adds all of the groups. The weekly hours tab finds all of the inputs for different topics during a week and adds them together. Then adds all of the groups together in that week to calculate a weekly hours worked. Then it adds all the weeks from the year to create a year-to-date hours worked. So I'll actually show you how this is happening. So since I filled in for 1/7 of 16, it's going to be right in here, which is right here. And since this is the only thing filled in on the timesheet, it shows 1 weekly hour for the total, and then total hours 1 hour. So why is it important for a volunteer to fill this out? Or exactly what happens after it's filled out? And there are a few reasons why this is important. The first is that your director can monitor your timesheet to understand how a volunteer's time is being spent. For example, a director could look at a project leader's timesheet and notice they're spending a lot of time in emails in comparison to actually working on a project they're heading. This will allow the director to see if there's any way they can help them focus more on that project. Another big reason the timesheet's helpful for you is to keep track of your goals. It can act as a reference as to what has been completed and potentially what still needs to be done. Further, the human resources team uses the timesheets of everyone in the organization to collect information on how many hours are worked and how the time is spent. This information is then used in various ways, such as to secure grants, create partnerships, and to monitor the health of our organization. So as always, thank you for your time and thank you for joining our organization. We hope that your volunteer experience is wonderful.